Hello there. What's your name?
Huerter.
You did some interesting things on Election Day, November 4, didn't you? Could you tell us about that?
That's right. I was asked after going around to various precincts earlier in the morning to take an attorney to two Gary, Indiana precincts. And in those precincts, since didn't have credentials to go into the precinct, I spent some time talking to some of the people outside. And I noticed a very nicely dressed individual, a nice suit and tie, struck up a conversation with the person. In the gist of the conversation, asked him, well, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm an attorney. Well, all right, where do you practice? And he says, well, I used to be an ACORN attorney about 10 years ago, but for the last 10 years, I've had a business in Shanghai, China, where I have a telemarketing company where we do infomercials, and in those infomercials we sell various things. And I says, oh really? Well, what brought you back here? And he says, well, I came back a couple of months ago specifically to work on the Obama presidential campaign, and I've been on their finance committee. I says, well, that's curious. I says, would you have a business card that you could share with me? He said, yes, he did. And so he shared this business card, which we'll have a enlarged version of it later on. So the fellow's name is Robert Roach, and the interesting part about it is, in the gist of the conversation, I says, well, you know, I've heard tell that a person could take a large chunk of money and farm it out into for virtual people and virtual credit card accounts, and then bring that back into a campaign with contributions perhaps less than $100 so that they would not have to be reported. And Mr. Roach kind of smiled and carried the conversation on to something else. And I said, well, you know, Mr. Roach, since you're on the finance committee, maybe it would be possible for you to open up your books and let us trace back some of those $85, $88 contributions and see where they come from. And again, Mr. Roach was, interestingly, a little bit nebulous and carried on the conversation to something else. So Mr. Roach indicated that after the election, he was on his way back to China to carry on his business.
So Mr. Roach came from China after living there 10 years and having a business in China, and he came back specifically to help with the Obama campaign, and you saw him handing out Obama tickets at a polling place in Gary, Indiana?
That's correct, and the interesting part about it, he was not plugging for anyone besides Obama. No other Democrats were being plugged for besides Obama. Now, there was nothing to indicate that he hadn't been back from China maybe multiple times during those years, so I don't necessarily believe that he hadn't been back before. Certainly he's had contacts because his card clearly says ACORN on it.
His card says ACORN, and then it gives a business address in Shanghai and a business address in Beijing. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And since he apparently flew to the United States, rented a car, rented a place to live, had meals, he's probably, we don't know for sure, but he may be expensing that with his business in China.
Well, it would be, well, as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we were to check closely enough that perhaps Mr. Roach even brought funds from China for the campaign.
And that would be certainly an interesting thing, since people are concerned about foreigners having an influence through money in a presidential campaign.
Absolutely, which of course is strictly illegal.
Well, thank you for sharing this story with us, Huerter, and we hope to have authorities check in on this a little bit further.
I certainly agree.